Good morning still. So today we are going to do a Bible study on He Was Grieved. We are doing our series on You Have a God Who Can Relate. And so we are going to talk about grief today. And I think that there is a misconception for some, obviously not for everybody, but there is a misconception that grieving somehow is a sin. But grieving is not a sin. Here's Captain Puffy, my daughter's newest kitten. Girl, that was not about you. Grieving is not a sin. It's what we do in our grief that can be sin or not be sin. Because obviously there are places that we can go in grief that are not good. And then there are places that we can go in grief that aren't necessarily terrible. It's not like it's awful, but it's not good for us. And I think anything that becomes something that could hurt us kind of ends up falling into a sin category, because what it is when we sin is something that hurts us. Now, it doesn't mean that we're supposed to be condemned about it. We just need to change it, because God, all the things that He's put in place, from the 10 Commandments to sending Jesus to die for our sins, was to protect us against ourselves from our sin, to reconnect us to Him. Everything that God set in motion was for us. All of the Bible, if you read it, is a love gift. It's God's love letter to us. It's Him saying, I love you and I want better things for you. And so today, we're going to start in Matthew 14, 13 and 14. So I'm going to turn there. And what I mean by sin is there are times where in grief we can act out and do things that are hurtful to ourselves or to others. Things that are not good. And I think we have this misconception that Jesus never grieved. And that's just not true. If you've read the New Testament, you know that Jesus had a cousin, John the Baptist, who baptized him, who came before him and told people, hey, there's someone coming after me, and it's a big deal. Sorry, protein. And if you've read the Bible, you also know that John the Baptist was killed. So we're going to go Matthew, and it's going to be 14, 13, and 14. Okay, Jesus feeds 5,000 is the title of this, but we're only going to read the first 2 verses. As soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. But the crowds heard where he was headed and followed on foot from many towns. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So, Jesus hears about John's death, and he goes to be alone. And he sees these people, and he feels compassion for them, compassion from God, and he heals them. But when Jesus headed off to be alone, what was he doing? So often when he was headed off to be alone in his grief or in his sorrow or in his pain or whatever he was experiencing, he went to be alone with God. And I think so often that it's not being alone that's wrong. It's not going and separating yourself for a time. It's what do you do in that time when you're alone? Do you let things fester and let them become a deeper wound? Or do you come to God and say, God, this hurts. God, I hurt. I lost this child or this spouse or this person that I loved who was older, and I already knew that they were going to die. I already knew that they were sick. I already knew that this thing was going to happen. But it still hurts. And I don't think that God has any problem with us coming to him and saying, this hurts. This sucks. This job loss, this child loss, this thing that happened to me. It was unfair and it wasn't right and it hurts. And God will meet you in your grief. God wants us to have relationship with him. And part of having a relationship with someone is grieving with them. And while there's no mourning in heaven, there's no sorrow or pain in heaven, God will sit with you in your grief on earth. Now, if you have someone who you lost and they were in pain and they were suffering and they were struggling and they were going through so many really hard, hurtful things and they've gone to heaven, know that that person is no longer in pain, no longer struggling with those things. And I know that there's different beliefs on this, but I sincerely believe that if somebody commits suicide, they do not go to hell, that they go to heaven. Because it is a mental illness and they're not in their right mind. And if they were saved, I don't think that they just automatically go to hell. So if you are concerned that your loved one who was saved but committed suicide is not in heaven, I don't personally believe that. I believe that people who are mentally ill and take their own life are given grace because they're not in their right mind. And if they were in their right mind, they wouldn't do what they've done. And it's kind of the same thing as if somebody who has a brain tumor and is acting funky because that brain tumor committed suicide, because I know things like that have happened before. You wouldn't assume that that person who had a brain tumor pressing on things that it shouldn't have and they were acting strange and weird and not themselves and they committed suicide, you wouldn't blame them. It's the same thing for mental health. And I think people have this idea, well, you can control your mental health. To a certain degree, yeah. But if you've been through something really traumatic, it's not as simple or straightforward as it seems. And having been through that myself and having had God walk me through it and out of it and being on the other side of it, I can still say today that, like, it's not as straightforward as it seems. There are so many people that really go through so much grief and so much pain. And I think that we need to remember that God will come and sit with us in our grief and our pain. We're going to go over to Luke 13:31 through 35. But I have a personal story that I'll tell at the end. Sorry, my daughter's kitten's over here in the corner distracting me. Okay, 13:31 through 35. At that time, some Pharisees said to him, "Get away from here if you want to live. Herod Antipas wants to kill you." Jesus replied, "Go tell that fox that I will keep on casting out demons and healing people today and tomorrow." Is this right? Sorry. Luke 13:31. Okay, we'll read it and see. Go tell that fox that I will keep on casting out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and the third day I will accomplish my purpose. Yes, today and tomorrow and the next day I must proceed on my way, for it wouldn't do for a prophet of God to be killed except in Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones God's messengers, how often I have wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. And now look at your house. Look, your house is abandoned, and you will never see me again until you say, blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. So Jesus is grieved over Jerusalem and over the people of God. And he is grieving, but he is also prophesying, but he's praying for them because he's saying, I love you and I came for you and you've rejected me. And you have to remember that these are God's chosen people. Everything that God did was for them. And as Gentiles, those of us who are not Jews are the lucky benefactors of their rejection of God, or their rejection of Jesus, really. But it wasn't that God picked us, it's that they rejected, and so the door was opened for us as well. But Jesus grieved over them. The thing is that every time Jesus grieved, he prayed to God. Every time he's praying to the Lord, he's grieving, but he's going to God. And I think that's the mistake that so many of us make, is that we grieve and we go through hard things. But in that grief, we can isolate, we can get alone, we can fester in things, pain and hurt, and things we didn't get to say, or things that we'll never get to say. There was a time where I lost a family member, and they died before I got to tell them that I was engaged. And it was a family member that would have been happy for me and probably would have understood, because they had been through something similar. And I never got the opportunity to tell them while they were alive. And for a long time, it really hurt and it really sucked and it really bothered me. And every time their death anniversary would come up, I would grieve and I would mourn. And it would hurt, especially because they died too soon and too young. And I was frustrated with God and grieving, God, why would you let this happen? Like, my family is saved, and this person was saved and a Christian, and they believed in you, and I don't have the reason. But I grieved that loss and that pain because it hurt. And it hurt so bad, but when that thing happened, I kept going to God and talking to him about it. And eventually, over time, it's not that it lessened, but that pain God took from me. We're going to read Luke 19:41 through 44. Okay. And this is Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. But as he came closer and saw the city ahead, he began to weep. How I wish today that you of all people would understand the way to peace. But now it is too late, and peace is hidden from your eyes. Before long, your enemies will build ramparts against your walls and encircle you and close in on you from every side. They will crush you into the ground, and your children with you. Your enemies will not leave a single stone in place, because you did not recognize it when God visited you. Again, Jesus wept, he grieved, he mourned, he was sad about things. We're going to go to John 11:33 and 11:33 to 35. And then I'm going to give my personal story of grief. Okay. So this is part of the story of Lazarus' death and raising. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but you can go back and read the entirety of it. It is John 11, and I highly recommend the entire story, but I'm just going to read a portion of it. So, John 11:33. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled within him, and he was deeply troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. They told him, Lord, come and see. Then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, see how much he loved him. So that was also 36. So Jesus was upset and frustrated and angry and sorrowful, grieving because of their lack of belief and their lack of faith. They'd already seen him do miracles. He's asking them, do you not believe in me, basically? And they're saying, well, of course I believe that, like, one day we'll be resurrected, you know, saying, like, after we die we'll be resurrected. But, like, they were missing what God could do. They were missing out on the power that was inside of Jesus, and he was grieved by the lack of faith. He wasn't mourning because Lazarus was dead, because that doesn't make sense when he knew he was about to go raise him from the dead. You would be joyful. But all of the lack of faith, the lack of belief in him and who he said he was, grieved him. They had been with him. They had seen the miracles he had done. They had seen the healings. They'd seen others raised from the dead. They'd seen him time and time again cast demons out and heal the sick and the lame. And yet they were mourning and grieving and speaking doubt and unbelief. And we've already been over, if you've watched any of these, how Jesus became upset with them every time they spoke doubt. And it's one of those things, sorry, kitten. It's one of those things where it became very, very frustrating for Jesus dealing with the lack of belief, because this is also coming close to the time when Jesus knows he's about to go to the cross and he's going to leave them, and he wants to leave them with faith, with this power, with this ability to heal the sick, to raise the dead, to do all these miraculous signs and wonders, to cast out demons. And yet they still lack faith. And so he was grieved, but every time Jesus was grieved, Jesus went to God. And that's the thing, is it's so easy to get stuck in a place where we've lost and we're just and I know this sounds so easy, but I'm going to give an example from my personal life. And I'm not going to give details, because details are sometimes unhelpful, because it will prevent you from putting yourself in the shoes of the person if they give too many details. And so sometimes I leave details out of stories so that people can understand how to see themselves in a situation, or see their situation like that. Sorry. So I had a thing happen to me, and it happened right before COVID happened. And it was, I don't even have the right words for traumatic. How traumatic or how devastating it was for me, and how life-altering it was. And it was so big that when COVID happened, I was so unaffected by COVID, because this thing had been so much bigger and more impactful. Hang on. My neighbor came out and is beating up on something in their backyard. But this thing had happened, and it was so huge and so impactful in my life that I knew that I had to go to therapy right away. And I did. And I was getting help, and I was in therapy, and it was in the Bible and in the things of God. And I thought I had dealt with it. And I thought I was fine. And I still wasn't going to a church. I was still very isolated. I still wasn't really coming to God about it. Like, I kind of had and kind of hadn't. There were parts of it that I was just still holding on to without realizing that I was holding on to things. And I ended up getting away from God. And certain things, when they happen to you, it's not, okay, this thing happened and now I have all these issues. Sometimes things implode over time because you don't deal with them. They fester and they get worse. And because I didn't deal with this thing the way that I should have immediately, even though I thought I had by going to therapy and doing all the things that I thought I should be doing, it ended up getting worse little by little. There were things that would set me off, and I'd have panic attacks, moments where I just couldn't deal. And I started smoking weed. I started not drinking, but just not taking care of myself. I stopped working out the way that I do to take care of my mental health. I stopped praying and going to God first. I stopped talking to people and pushing myself to be around people, and just started isolating. And I almost, I guess you could say, went into hiding. And this thing just got worse and worse and worse until I almost took my life 2 years ago. And I had started going to therapy again, even to try to deal with this thing, only to realize that I needed to go to God, not people. And if you've found a therapist that can help you and it's the right therapist and you can find the right medications that help you, awesome. Nothing I was doing was working. Medications that I had tried had backfired and given me horrendous side effects that altered my life. Like screaming fits kind of altered my life. Like I was up in my husband's face screaming at the top of my lungs on an antipsychotic medication that was supposed to be a sleep medication but wasn't, and instead just made me extremely psychotic and vomit every time we were in a car. Like nothing I was doing was helping. I dropped like 15 pounds in a month being on another antidepressant that didn't help. I tried all kinds of things that didn't help. And I was praying for someone else one day and God said, they're doing the same thing that you were doing. Instead of bringing all that hurt and all that pain to me and all that loss and all that grief, and all that theft that happened afterwards and all the things that, because when things happen, sometimes it takes you time to realize how much was stolen from you, how much was taken from you in that moment, not just physically or mentally or emotionally, but like the ability to be who you were, the ability to move through life the way you used to. And I had finally been bringing all of it to God, all of the ugly, all of the hateful, all of the things that I wanted to pretend like I didn't feel this thing and I had forgiven and things were all okay. And instead of giving God the grief and the pain and the sorrow and really letting myself mourn for myself and who I was and who I wouldn't be anymore because of this thing, I just tried to stuff it down and hide it. And it didn't get better like that. And it wasn't until, this is the best way I know how to say it, till I got naked with God. Not naked as in a physical sense, but just stripped off all of the pretense of what I was pretending was okay. And was really vulnerable in a way that I didn't want to be vulnerable, being like, what was done was wrong, and how I got into that position was wrong. And it was my fault that I was in a place to be vulnerable like that. And that was hard to admit, that like my sin had led me to a place that I never thought I'd be. And it was so hard to be like, God, I can't fix this, because I come from a family of fixers. Give us a chore and we got it. Give us a project, we've done it. And it was so hard to be like, God, I can't fix this. And I'm beyond caring anymore about fixing it. Like, I'm ready to just give up on my life. And I don't want to live anymore. And to come to him and to be so honest and so vulnerable and so just naked with God, like just no pretense. I messed up. Something messed up happened to me. Here's my life. Like, if you can fix it, my life is yours. And God did. Little by little, day by day, things started to get better. But I had to come to him in my grief and be like, and maybe what happened to you wasn't anybody's fault. Maybe what happened to you was just something that happened, and that's okay. Like, there's still times where you can come to God and you can just be like, I'm angry at everything. I'm angry at you, God. I mean, I did. I came and I said, why didn't you stop this thing? You're supposed to be all powerful. There are supposed to be angels that stand around about me and guard and protect me. Da, 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 da. I went off on God. And you know what I learned in that process is that God can handle it. God is a big God, and he can handle all the human things that we're dealing with. if we'll just actually come to him and be vulnerable with him. And I did. And a lot of things changed. And I got sober. I got healthy. I wasn't struggling with stress and anxiety, PTSD, depression, suicidal thoughts. All those things are gone. I'm not saying those things never try to come back and attack me, because occasionally they do. But my entire life changed because I went to God and I said, God, this sucked. And that's one of the things that I've learned in going through something that just sucks, is that sometimes people don't need you to come along and fix anything for them. Sometimes they just need somebody to sit with them in their grief and say that sucks. And just get that, like, the thing that happened to them was wrong and it sucks, or that it was hard and it sucks, or that it hurt and it wasn't preventable and it sucks. And sometimes it just is nice to have somebody say, this sucks. But you can't stay there. You have to every day push yourself more and more into the Word, into the things of God. Lean on Him. And I've said this just recently. I spend a lot of time reading my Bible and praying and like doing Bible studies like this, or looking up scriptures or things like that, because I'm leaning so hard on God that if God stepped away, I'd fall over, because it's not my strength holding me up in certain moments, it's His. And that is what you need to do when everything starts falling apart. I think that one of the best things about the Bible is you can see all these people that messed up and they caused their own issues. And the thing that they did most often is they went back to God. And they whined and they complained to God. And sometimes it was sin, but sometimes God was just there for them. There was a prophet, and I don't want to say the wrong name because I get prophets mixed up in the Bible. But there had been a famine, and then there had been a thing, and God had killed all these false prophets, and He'd done all these great things through this prophet. And then this prophet runs away and he hides and he's crying and he's saying, I just want to die. And instead of God being mad at him, He feeds him and He gives him water and He gives him comfort, gives him rest. And sometimes God knows that, like, it's not you complaining because you just want to complain. It's because everything is so hard that it feels like you're being crushed to death by life. And He knows that you just need to eat, to sleep, to be watered, to be fed the Word, to be fed food, to be fed comfort. And God is not beyond saying, hey, I've got you, I love you. This thing that happened to you, it absolutely sucks. And it just was awful. But I'm going to get you through this, and I'm going to pull you through. And I think so often we can look at other people's life, because as I was praying for this other person, I was looking at their life and I'm like, they need to just pull it together. And that was when God had said, they're doing the exact same thing that you had been doing. Instead of bringing all their problems to me and all that pain and all that hurt and all that stuff that happened, they're trying to carry it themselves and fix it themselves. And what they can't see is if they would just bring it to me, I could fix it for them. And they wouldn't have to carry all these things themselves. And that really hit me, because I hadn't thought I was carrying anything, but I realized that through that whole process that I was trying to fix something myself, trying to go to men first to fix it, trying to go to people first to fix it, trying to deal with the physical side of it instead of going to God and let God heal it from a spiritual side. And I think that a lot of times in grief and hurt and loss, we try to fix everything from the physical side, and we neglect as believers the spiritual side, and taking it to God and saying, God, here I am in all of my nakedness and all of my pain and vulnerability and my hurt and the things that I don't want anyone else to see. But you're the God that sees what no one else can see, and you're the God that knows what no one else knows, and you're the God that feels what no one else feels, and hears what no one else hears, and sees me in my entirety. And I can't do this myself. God, heal me, fix me, do this thing with me, because I don't want to do it alone. And if we would just go to God like that, and just be so vulnerable and so honest and so open, I think that we would see so many things in our life change for the better. But I also found it comforting to know that, like, when Jesus lost John the Baptist, he was sad and he wanted to go alone, to be just alone and to grieve the loss of his cousin. And though he was in the middle of his own grief and his own hurt, he saw other people hurting, and his compassion moved them. And I think that's so much how our God looks at us. He can be grieving and hurting. I don't think that God is happy when people commit suicide. I don't think God is happy when people are hurt that he loves. I don't think I think it breaks God's heart when things happen to us, because he loves us. And it hurts even more when we won't go to him to let him heal it for us. But I also think that even when God is hurting, he sees us hurting. And if we will come to him with all of that pain and hurt and brokenness, that God will see it, and he will meet us, and he will heal us of our grief and our hurt and our pain. And it's so easy to think that he doesn't care because you can't see him and you can't hear him. But you have to remember that God so loved the world, John 3:16, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whomsoever believeth in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. God loved us so much, he gave up the only Son he had. If you think that God doesn't care about your hurt, you're so wrong. Because from the very beginning of the Bible to the very end, it is God's love letter to us, saying, I loved you so much, I created the heavens and the earth for you. I loved you so much that when sin separated us, when Satan found a way to bring sin in and separate me from you, I searched desperately for ways to reconnect us, and I created a plan from the foundation of the earth to win you back, because I could see the things that were going to happen. But I also knew that I could not override the creation that I made, because I set laws and rules in motion. And one of those things is freedom of choice, free will. And God is a perfect gentleman. He does not override our free will. And I think that so often there's all these love stories that we'll read, and we won't even read the Bible and realize what a love story it is to us. And it's so heartbreaking, because if you read it, you can see how desperately God wanted to be reconnected to us, and how much he loved us. How much he gave over and over again, even when we were ungrateful and unthankful and ignored him and didn't notice him, and still does those same things today. Jesus died for us, and we still ignore and forget and let other things become forefront of our mind instead of God. Our jobs take more precedence over him half the time. Our family lives take more precedence over him most of the time. We'll do all these different things, and we'll forget to even read the Bible, or to pray, or to say, God, thank you that I woke up today. And it's one of those things where if you stop and you take a moment and you realize, God is with me in my grief. He never leaves me nor forsakes me. He loves me. And if I just brought it to him, he would be willing to heal me. It's such a beautiful thing to know that we have a God that not only knows what it's like to grieve and to mourn and to feel the pains that we felt, because Jesus was a real man, but to know that our God loves us so much that if we just would come to him, he wants to heal it. He wants to fix it for us. Anyways, I hope that this helps somebody. I hope that this comforted somebody. And I am not interested in debating on my opinion on suicide. I know that different churches believe different things, but the way that I was raised, if you're saved, you're saved. It doesn't mean that you won't, if you walk out of God's will, struggle in life. But I don't think that somebody who is mentally unwell to the point of taking their life, God is going to reject if they were saved before they died. And I really believe that God loves us and He understands. It says in the Bible that God sees the heart of man. So God knows when we're well and when we're not. And when we are struggling with certain things. And so I really believe that God has more grace and mercy and compassion than to condemn somebody for taking their own life. If you want to debate that, you can debate it with yourself, because I'm, again, not interested. Anyways, have a great day. God bless.